Hi friends, hope you are doing well. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. So today there is a very interesting question from a young viewer in the channel, and this question is that this guy is in class 12, grade 12, and he essentially likes physics, math, and he wants to do a BSc and MSc degree, hopefully followed by a PhD degree. But his parents want him to give competitive exams such as the JEE and so on and go to engineering colleges where they think that he's likely to get a job. They also feel that this guy, if he goes for this particular path of doing BSc and PhD and so on, he is not going to have a good job. He may be working on different projects out there, and these may be all temporary jobs. It's going to be harder for him to get a job which pays a good salary. So this is a very big problem or very big problem which affects students and parents as far as India is concerned, and we are going to look at this problem today. Now the question here is that the student wants to do a certain thing, but his parents have different plans for him. But what his parents don't realize is that the student's capabilities, the student's talents may be in a different direction. Now, it's also there that the parents are making a decision based on the current point of time, and they have not seen some of the things which are happening in the software world out there, in IT, and so on. So, when people think that engineering colleges, engineering jobs are going to be big out there, they are making an estimate based on the current point in time. But if you know anything about what is happening in terms of AI, you know that most of the programming jobs out there, most of the normal software jobs out there are going to be decimated by deep learning, machine learning, chatbots, and so on. So it's very likely that programmers are going to be in big trouble after a few years. And it may also be possible that somebody who is doing a career in the science domain is going to be actually better off. So that's something most parents do not know at this given time. So the problem is that parents are focusing on the outcome of the education system and not on the capabilities and talent of the student. So I'm going to give you 5 different aspects to consider before you make the decision as to whether you should go for competitive exams and become a technologist, or whether you should go for the scientific career path and end up probably with an MSc degree or a PhD in the Indian system. So the first thing is that you have to ask the question, do you like numericals or theory when you study physics, chemistry, and math? And if you are somebody who really likes the theory but not the difficult numericals which are out there, then you have a proclivity towards studying science, because as far as the competitive exams are concerned, they are extremely biased toward hard numerical problems. And this problem is especially so when you are looking at the problems which come in the physics paper and the problems which are coming in the math paper. Because the math problems which you are getting in these papers, they are not problems which have anything to do with mathematics research as it is happening today, but it's more about the kind of bag of tricks which is taught to the engineering students who are expected to essentially solve engineering problems out there. So these problems are very different compared to the research which is going on in math. Similarly, if you look at the numerical problems in physics, these problems involve very traditional physics out there, whether it is mechanics, whether it is magnetism, and so on, whether it is optics. And what is happening in physics today is something which is very different. It has to do with quantum mechanics, it has to do with string theory, it has to do with very different problem out there, maybe semiconductor design and so on. So again, lot of the things which are required as far as numericals are concerned in physics, chemistry, and math, these are not going to be very much required in science. So if you are somebody who likes science for the theoretical part, then certainly you should go for the PhD and the science route. Now, the second point has to do with, do you like the practical part of the subject and experiments or not? Now, if you are somebody who likes practicals, this is telling you that you may be better off actually studying science. Because what I have seen is that most people who do well in the competitive exam, they actually are masters of numerical problems. And therefore, if you are somebody who is great at numerical problems, certainly you can go for the competitive exams. But if you are not, then you can go for science, especially if you like practicals. Now, I have seen in many fields such as chemistry, lot of the work is actually experimental. So you will find very frequently people who didn't get too high marks throughout their high school and so on end up becoming very famous chemists, and they may even get a Nobel Prize one day. And this is simply because they have a certain way of thinking, they understand the experimental approach to science, and this is certainly something which propels them to the next level of stardom. Now, the third issue has to do with what point of middle class do you come from? Nowadays, most people think that they are from middle class, but what happens is that some people are from the lower middle class, which is a segment of society which is very much in need for quick jobs. But there are people who are also from the different point of a middle class where they are relatively well settled. Now, there are students out there whose parents have built a house, so they are not in such great need for the student to get a job immediately. So in this case, what happens is that the student may do a master's degree, do a PhD, and spend a lot of time in gaining all these experience and knowledge out there. And the parents would not be very concerned. In fact, I know of some students, as far as India is concerned, who actually wanted to stay within the country. Their parents didn't have any issue with that. They didn't want them to necessarily get a software job and migrate quickly and send them dollars, because they had a house, they had one more house which they had rented and so on. They had a lot of money in their provident fund. So in this kind of situation, the student is actually relatively well off. He or she knows that later in life they have a house coming to them. This is especially true for single child situations. So if you are in one of those situations where you do not have a quick need for money to support your family, then I would say you can pursue science, because science does take a longer time. It is a higher gestation period required to actually get your master's, get your PhD. You may even need to do postdoc if you are going to become a successful scientist. So that brings me to point number 4. Are you and your family ready for you to do a PhD? And this is because it may be 3, 4, 5 years which may be spent in doing a PhD, and during this time you may earn very less. So the PhD stipend is simply enough money to get by for your food and so on. It's not enough money to help support your family. So compared to that, if you were to get a job in the private sector, you would make much more money. So again, this is a call you have to make based on your parents' financial situation, and also sometimes the part of the country they come from. So if you are coming from a part of the country which is very business like, then they are not going to be so supportive to you in pursuing a degree which they think is not going to pay off a lot. So again, this mindset of ROI is there in some communities, in some parts of the country. So then in that case, you may not want to do the PhD because you will not get support from the family. Finally, the fifth point has to do with, do you have a global mindset? Are you willing to go around the world doing postdoc and so on, doing PhD? Because that is certainly going to propel the case. Because what often happens is that in science, if you have finished your master's degree from the Indian system, for example, if you were to pick up a PhD from a foreign university, in a top ranked university in a well developed country, then certainly that's going to boost your career enormously. So again, your parents, you yourself must be somebody who is willing to go abroad, maybe to Germany, maybe to US, maybe to France, maybe to Japan, maybe to Australia to do a PhD. And you may be somebody who is willing to then go to a different country to do a postdoc, because some of these things are going to be important. Of course, this is also going to require you to have a good knowledge of the English language, of being a global citizen, of having a different worldview. You should be very tolerant to working with different type of people out there. And if all this is true, then certainly the science PhD path is right for you. So I hope this video answers some of these questions which you had, and I wish you success in becoming a PhD in the science domain.